Welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports' continuing coverage of Super Bowl 59, live here from the New Orleans Convention Hall. I'm Baker Machado, alongside our editor-in-chief at Front Office Sports, Dan Roberts, and we're very excited to be joined by the Chief Media and Business Officer over at the NFL, Brian Rolapp. Brian, thanks so much for joining us, and happy Super Bowl week.
Happy Super Bowl week to you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so there's a lot to be made about all the NFL deals and media deals that you guys had this last year, and obviously the ratings. You had 123 million people watch this game last year. Ratings still pretty good for the NFL. Why has the NFL always, I guess, never really sort of had a big dent when it comes to this, and it's still been the most watched television event across every spectrum?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is the competitive nature of the league. Even though we sort of have this dynasty brewing in Kansas City, you never know at the beginning of the year who's going to be in the Super Bowl and who's going to win it and how they get there. So that the stories are always great. I also think this is one of the few cultural moments we have left in this country. I mean, this is, you have over 100 million people. You have people who don't really watch a lot of football or anything else during the season, but they come together for this. And that's the one great thing about football. It's one of the last American campfires where people get around and spend time with each other.
Do you think we in the media make too big of a deal and an issue about the ratings? I mean, look, you guys do incredible. You have the AFC Championship game getting over 50 million people watching. But do you think we consume and are too obsessed with the numbers?
I think maybe people get too obsessed with the fluctuations week to week, year to year, window to window. We never look at it that way. I mean, so this year, I think the ratings are down 1 or 2%. It's the second most viewed season we've had in a decade. Okay, so when you just look at the absolute numbers, we look at the long-term trends, right? It's almost like a stock graph. Is it going up and to the right? It's going to have some fluctuations week to week. It's going to move around a bit. We look at how many people are consuming the sport for how long over a period of time. That's what we obsess about. I think a lot of other people obsess about like the minutia, week to week, year to year fluctuations. We don't.
You mentioned the Super Bowl being a cultural moment. And it's interesting because obviously, as Baker said, we parse through the ratings in the media. The NBA had a significant ratings dip at the beginning of this season. And it seems to me the trend that we're seeing is appointment viewing, must watch either one-off sports events or shorter seasons. Look at WNBA, look at Unrivaled. And the NFL is at an advantage because scarcity. You know your team only plays once a week. Now you guys might extend to 18 regular season games, but the NBA and MLB seasons, increasingly, it seems to me, might just be too long. And we might be entering a period where sports events have to be must-watch, limited in scope.
Well, I do think we do sort of have a built-in scarcity value to the sport, which I think has always been an advantage that we've had. So it makes each game an event. I mean, there's only 8 home games, right? Or, and 9 home games depending on the year. It's an important event in a community. But I also think you're seeing the larger trend that, listen, as the world shifts to streaming, linear television is still great at delivering events, but entertainment consumption is shifted. And there's only a few things left that get people together. And that has a significant value in the marketplace whenever you can aggregate tens of millions of people at one time. It doesn't happen very often. And so I think that's an advantage of sports in general and certainly of the NFL.
Obviously the NFL has contracts with all the networks well into 2030, but there are opt-out clauses in there. I think in 2028 for a lot of the networks that you work with. Is the expectation here that maybe the NFL might opt out to get a bigger deal similar to what the NBA got in terms of the billions that they got from ESPN and others, so that way the NFL can sort of get more money from these networks?
Yeah, listen, there's been a lot of talk about the opt-outs. I mean, we can opt out of some of them, none of them, all of them. We haven't made any decisions. But the reason they exist is that if anyone can tell you what the future is going to look like, certainly in 2030, they're lying to you, right? Nobody knows. We're in a time of unprecedented change. So when you don't know what the future looks like, you put a premium on flexibility, and that's why they exist. And so we'll make the appropriate call at the appropriate time, but we're going to ground our decisions not just in economics, but also this is a sport that's been built on reach. We want to reach as many fans as we can. And even our streaming packages with partners like Amazon and Netflix, those aren't just any streaming platform. Those are scaled big streaming platforms that are reaching tens of millions of people for our game windows. It kind of looks like broadcast. And so we're very judicious about it, and that's how we'll think about it.
Let's talk about streaming. When you say they basically look like the other broadcasts, exclusive games on Netflix this season. Occasionally we've had exclusive games on Peacock, exclusive games on Amazon. This season, I think was the first time a playoff game was on Amazon. And you saw a lot of people suddenly realizing it in real time. Like, oh, the game is on Amazon. I've written a little bit about this in a weekend column, but there is a sense of kind of fragmentation, frustration from some people. It's like, where can I find this game? As you start to see more games given to more streamers. Do you guys think about that, worry about that, making sure it's easy to find the thing?
We do. I mean, I think you have to think about our streaming in sort of a few buckets. The first one is working with our current partners now who are trying to figure out their future in streaming. That's Peacock. That's Paramount Plus, where all the CBS games you can get on Paramount Plus. You can watch them on CBS or watch them on Paramount Plus. The second is what you're talking about is some of these exclusive streaming games. I mentioned it. We have 15 games on Amazon. We had 2 on Netflix. Those games, by the way, are over the air on television in the local markets,
yep.
right? So you still can get them on television in the local markets. That's a small percentage of our inventory, and they're on really big platforms. You are on Amazon. You may be watching Prime Video, you might be buying toilet paper, but you're on Amazon, and you have Netflix. And so those are scaled platforms. So we think about reach and not just any sort of streaming platform. So we're very cognizant of it. We want easy access. We want reach. And that's why you've only seen a few of our games. If you think about the Amazon package on Thursday Night Football, that was the first time we moved a full package from one medium to another since we moved a package from broadcast television to cable television on ESPN in 1987. We don't do this a lot. And so this idea that like it's super fragmented, we're moving things around, when you step back at it, that's not really the case. And we're finding with the viewership numbers, people are finding the game.
Is there an expectation with the interest in flag football, the NFL wanting to get into this as well? There's going to be a media deal on the table for those two. And is the expectation then that you're going to work with existing partners for new revenue for that?
Look, I think we're big believers in flag football for a lot of reasons. It's clearly going to be an Olympic sport, and so we think it has international potential. One of the greatest things about flag football is half of our fans right now are female and don't really have access to playing the game competitively. We are now providing that. And some of the most exciting things happening across the country is more and more states are sanctioning flag football as a high school sport, which I think is fantastic. And so we love this long-term for the development of the sport in general. We do believe, as it grows in popularity, that there is room for more leagues, including a professional league. And that would clearly have a media package as well. We're very early in this. The commissioner talked about it in his press earlier this week. So I think we're pretty bullish on it.
Speaking of separate media packages, we are all watching very closely the international expansion of the league, playing more games than ever abroad. Is there a future in which you can parcel those out as an additional package that you give to a Netflix, an Apple TV Plus, one of these streamers, or it could be a network, but you say, you're going to get the 6, 7, 8 international games this year?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I mean, we're looking at all iterations of this. There's some, when you think about international, you need to think about the platforms you're on. So you take those Netflix games we did on Christmas Day. Those were the first game package that we sold to one media partner for global distribution. That is not something before streaming that was really available to a sports league. Used to do a deal in the US, I got to do a deal in Spain, I got to do a deal in the UK, different media partners, different media models. With scaled streaming platforms, that's not the case. So that's very interesting to us. One of the big reasons why we did the Netflix games on Christmas Day. But also you look at the windows, those 9:30 a.m. windows that we have.
It's nice.
Eastern kind of works better internationally, right? And so you start thinking about when you play these games. So these are all things we're thinking through, but the headline is we really are focused on international. We are just scratching the surface of what we think the growth can be of this sport. And there's some of these catalysts that are happening that we think is going to help us in the long term.
What about the alternative broadcasts? We had, yes, the altcasts. We had, the Nickelodeon ones, the Toy Story ones, the Simpson ones, even the Manning casts you could even add into there as well. How significant and important are those, especially when you're talking with these partners, to sort of have alternative broadcasts in addition to the regular game that we're all watching?
Yeah, it's an important development we've had in the last handful of years. And we've tried a lot of things, but certain things are really starting to work. What the alt telecasts are about is when you have this many fans in this country, almost 200 million fans, they're all different, right? They're demographically, age, socioeconomic, where they live, what they're interested in. And so we want to reach them all, but then we want to super serve them. And so some of these alt telecasts do that. So the Nickelodeon telecast is a perfect example. It's one of the more successful things we've done. We've done it for a wild card game. We've done it for the Super Bowl. You talk to fans and you look at the numbers. There's a lot of fans who say, my kid didn't really engage in football until he saw that. Now I can watch it with him and he's really interested. So it's really interesting to them. There are 30-some-year-olds who are like, hey, this is like nostalgic to me. I'm like watching like SpongeBob and Patrick like dance around. Like I'm reliving my childhood. This is great. This kept me in the game longer, right? So it's just sort of serving people differently. Well, then you look at the Manning cast, which gets a little bit over 1 million viewers. It's a big number. And people are watching that because they might not be as interested in the teams that are playing, but they're really interested to see what Peyton and Eli are talking about, or they have a guest that are important, or the game might be not as competitive as they would like, but I'm going to stick around because what they're talking about is interesting. So we're seeing also retaining viewers longer because there's an alternative experience that they can do. So I think they all don't work, but when you get them right, I think you can grow the audience, super serve it, and then retain the audience you have.
I got just one more for you, Brian. When we talk about altcasts, I mean, what we're really talking about is the rise of consuming sports on social only. In other words, there are people who they didn't sit down and watch the whole game, but they feel like they got it because they see every clip. It's sort of, I call it the meme economy, right? Everything now is just memed. It's short, quick hit clips. How has the way the NFL approaches social changed and evolved? I mean, we wrote up the news last week that you guys are going to let retired players use official replays from YouTube for their own personal brands. That's big for them as players try and build their own brands. How are you approaching social in new and interesting ways? There's Blue Sky now, there's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's LinkedIn. There's a lot to kind of wrap your arms around.
Yeah, it is. It's a really good point. You talk about all telecasts. We know that 7 out of every 10 fans, when they're watching a game, they have a second screen open.
Yep.
And they might be on Instagram. They might be texting their buddy. They might be doing a million
Probably
things.
3 screens.
Probably 3 screens. They're doing that's always people are cobbling together their own experience anyway, whether we do an all telecast or not. But it's also about outside of the game, right? The NFL football has always been about a 365, 24/7 business. Off season, people want to engage in the sport. Social plays a very important role in that. And so we've really leaned in. We have really lucrative, not only from a reach standpoint, but financially, deals with all the major social platforms. And it's something that we've leaned into and have done really well, and an important part of how we measure consumption. So when we look at a fan, how they're engaged in the NFL, what they do outside of the game and what they do on social is as important metric as anything we look at. And these platforms, I don't need to tell you how big they are and how much they scale. So our partnerships with X and with TikTok and with all these other social platforms are really beneficial and lucrative, and they're really great partners. Like, because what you do obviously with a highlight on Instagram is going to be completely different from what you did on SportsCenter or on linear, and how you embrace creators, which is a huge focus of ours, versus what you do elsewhere. A really big increase in our partnership happens to be around YouTube as well. We've always had a partnership with YouTube, but as lately as they've had Sunday Ticket and how they use the creators to lean into Sunday Ticket, and some of the innovation they're doing there has been great as well. So it's really been interesting.
Dan and I could talk about this for hours on end. Brian, we really appreciate you talking with us, and congratulations on another incredibly successful season for you guys.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to see you both.
Thanks,
All right.
Brian.
And we have more continuing coverage from Radio Row in preparation for Super Bowl 59 from Front Office Sports coming your way.